Good evening again, everyone. Welcome to the October installment of our Tuesdays with Merton webinar. It's great to see you again in the month of fall. I'm Liz Burkemper, and I serve on the board of directors of the International Thomas Merton Society. Tuesdays with Merton is presented by the International Thomas Merton Society, or ITMS, and co-sponsored by the Bernardine Center at Catholic Theological Union in Chicago. Join us for this webinar series on the second Tuesday of each month. Tonight's webinar will be recorded and available both on YouTube and as a podcast soon after the live event. The talk will be followed by moderated discussion and Q&A, and our speaker has provided discussion questions on which you can reflect and comment during this time. Or you can simply ask any questions you might have of the speaker after the talk. Before we share our regular opening prayer, our Vice President of the ITMS, Paul Pinkoski, will offer a few words. Paul?
Good evening, everybody. We are deeply saddened to have received the news that after a year-long struggle with cancer, Greg Hillis passed away this morning. Greg was a Canadian, an evangelical Protestant, who through his encounter with the writings of Thomas Merton, fell in love with the Catholic Church. He taught for many years at Bellarmine University in Kentucky, leaving last summer to join the faculty at the Candler School of Theology at Emory University. His book, Man of Dialogue, Thomas Merton's Catholic Vision, won the Louis Award for the best Merton book at our 2023 conference. Greg was a fine scholar, a fine teacher, and a fine person. His presence will be missed by the Merton community. A GoFundMe page has been set up to assist his wife Kim and their children. We are putting a link in the chat for those of you who may be able to contribute. If you can't get to the address, just write GoFundMe Greg Hillis in your browser and that'll take you to the page. Please pause with me for a moment as we offer a prayer for Greg and his family. Holy One, before whom generations rise and pass away, we praise you for all your servants who, having lived this life in faith, now live eternally with you. We thank you especially for your servant Greg. We praise you for the gift of his life, for all in him that was good, kind, and faithful, for the grace that you gave him that kindled in him the love of your name and enabled him to serve you faithfully. We thank you that for Greg, death is past and pain is ended, and he has now entered the joy you have prepared. Comfort, we pray, Kim, his family, friends, and students as they mourn his passing. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Thank you for your words and prayer, Paul. Now I would like to turn it over to Tom Malowitz for our opening prayer. Tom is an assistant professor and director of the Ed.D. Leadership Program in the College of Education at Spalding University in Louisville, Kentucky. He is the author of Authenticity, Passion, and Advocacy, Approaching Adolescent Spirituality from the Life and Wisdom of Thomas Merton, and most recently, Truth and Reconciliation, an exploration of leadership and accountability within divided nations and cyclic ideologies. Tom is a member of the International Thomas Merton Society and the Thomas Merton Society of Great Britain and Ireland. Tom?
Thank you very much, Liz. It's an honor to be here and serve as moderator for this event. Let us take a moment for prayer. Oh God, we thank you for this opportunity to come together, inspired by the life and writing of Thomas Merton, to seek you through contemplative reflection. We ask you to open our ears and inflame our hearts so that your Spirit may inspire us to bear the fruit of righteousness and justice in the world. As Isaiah prophesied, through the same Spirit, may we proclaim good news to the poor, bind up the brokenhearted, proclaim freedom for captives, and release from darkness for prisoners. Instead of being in a state of complacent sterility and hardness of heart, may we focus on beauty, joy, and praise through a lens of creativity and delight, of contemplative mayhem. We offer the intentions we hold in the depths of our hearts. In your name, amen.
Thank you so much, Tom. Now it is my honor to introduce our speaker for the evening, Gray Matthews. Gray is Assistant Professor of Communication at the University of Memphis in Memphis, Tennessee. Gray has served on the International Thomas Merton Society as a member of the board, co-editor of the Merton Annual, and coordinator of the 2007 ITMS conference, as well as coordinator of the Memphis ITMS Chapter since 2001. Gray has been a frequent presenter at ITMS conferences and recently authored an exploratory essay on Merton and decolonial issues of contemplative concern. Here is Gray Matthews on Contemplative Mayhem. Gray.
Thank you, Liz. Can you hear me okay? If I unmuted myself well? Okay. I'd like to first thank the committee and the Merton Society and all of you for supporting this program and for taking some time out of your evening to care for a kind of thinking about contemplative life. And I have worried about this presentation because though I trust myself, I trust myself well enough to know that I can get a little, not necessarily erratic, but I'm not well programmed. So I'm prepared, but I do have a kind of a habit of kind of sidestepping and sidetracking myself at times as I get a little crazed and excited about things that we are thinking about. And there's so much that is compiled into this presentation that I'm hoping and I'm kind of banking on things to resonate that I don't necessarily explain. So though I'm going to try to be as clear as I can, I'm probably not going to define contemplative mayhem, but I do want to characterize it. I do want to give you something to consider, but mainly what I would like to do is open thinking, open questions, and I want to use the metaphor of an open window, not only a window that we can look through at something such as the world we're living in, or that we're barely living in, but I want us to be able to open that window. And then a kind of hint about contemplative mayhem is not just open that window, but go through that window, go out the window into the world where we can practice contemplative mayhem. And so I'm going to work with that kind of metaphor of opening things. And the final thing I would say is I kind of introduce where we're going. I ultimately want to question and open our conceptions and our tradition of conceiving contemplation, and even questioning, if not opening up, the practice of contemplation and the meaning of what contemplative life could be. I've got a PowerPoint of some imagery, some things that I have diagrammed, just ways of looking, thinking, seeing, kind of beholding, but opening and questioning and thinking and rethinking contemplative life. The world is contemplative, and the meaning of contemplation and and how much we lose if we sever what is contemplative about our living, our livingness in this world. So I'm going to use a PowerPoint, and I'm going to go quick. We're going to go deep, and we're going to go fast in the depths. I'm not going to hold back. And so let me get this up. Let me move things so I can see. So here we go. You may need to move if you have some screen images. There's a little double arrow in the corner, and you can probably click on that and move some things, or I may have done the wrong thing myself. So, well, now we're back to where, hang on. See, I told you, I'm not programmed. All right, so there may be some, I've got several things that might be blocking things. So kind of, if you can kind of be patient with this and kind of work around things that may block your view of things, and I'll try to explain things. But here's our title. And the painting on the left is from 1940 by Kandinsky. It's a very meaningful painting to me. And I'm going to click to the next slide of a kind of close-up of the painting. And what you're looking at is not chaos. It's not necessarily order either, as created or developed or constructed or ordained by the artist. The title is Sky Blue. So the focus and the theme of this painting is the sky, and in the sky are these beautiful things, these beautiful objects, these beautiful designs, these creations of an artist. And at first you might think they're abstract because you don't recognize them and you don't, what are these and what are they doing? But I'd like to use this painting to kind of suggest that we are living in a world, we are on a planet that is in a sky. It is in a cosmos. And things are moving and things are all over the place and things are different. And there are things that we do not understand. But I want to question the impulse that we have as human beings to impose an order on this world or on this scene and to try to put things into categories so that we can understand them. I think there's something anti-contemplative about doing that. And so I'd like this to kind of sit as an image, and I'll come back to it at the end of the presentation, and we'll look at it again, maybe in another kind of way. But I'd like to suggest that what we're looking at is contemplative mayhem. And I'm bringing up a quote from Virginia Woolf, who said 2 years before this painting was made by Kandinsky, Woolf said, "Let us never cease from thinking, what is this civilization in which we find ourselves?" So it's like we're looking at this image of the sky and there are things are in it. And we are in this picture. We are in this world. And Virginia Woolf wants us to never cease wondering, if not questioning, what is this world? What is this civilization? What is this system that we are in? Here's an image of a grid. This is systematic. And I'm going to pop onto the screen 3 fairly recent movies, one about 10 years ago, 2 much more recently. And I'd like to use 3 films to kind of characterize in another way the questioning that we are doing these days about the world that we're living in. And what I'm looking for and what I'm wanting you to think about is how do we respond to the world situation as we imagine and as we experience it. And we'll begin with 3 film references. First one is from 2013, a movie called Snowpiercer. The Snowpiercer is the train. So you're looking at a movie poster. The train is the Snowpiercer. It goes all the way around the world and it pierces through snow. And why it pierces through snow is because it has to. because human beings had gotten to the point, this is in the future, this is a dystopian movie. Human beings had gotten to the point of confronting global warming that they dared to do some geoengineering in the atmosphere to halt the warming that we were producing. But they fouled up the atmosphere so badly that they did not see what they were going to do, what effect it would be. And they ended up winterizing the planet. They froze the planet by destroying the atmosphere by their engineering, geoengineering strategy. All life on Earth died in that deep freeze. A remnant of human civilization was on the train, and the train has been running ever since, and it can't stop. If it stops, everyone on board will die. And so the whole world of human beings is on this train. And the beginning of the movie initiates you at the back of the train among the poorest of the poor on the train. The train is human order. Every car has its classification, its function, its station, and there are people all throughout the train, and they live different lifestyles. But the masses of people, the majority of the people, are in the very back of the train. And the movie opens with the people in the back of the train wanting to revolt. And what they're going to have to do is go through the train, go through the order of the train. And the order of the train is the only order on Earth. And it's going around the world at breakneck speed, and it can't stop. It's a system that has kind of gotten out of control. Here's the next movie, and I hope you saw this. This is an incredible film to watch and to experience. Oppenheimer came out last summer. It is one of the most intense or intensely intellectual films that I've ever seen. And you're put into the recent past. It's not a fictional movie, of course. This is about the project in which the atom bomb was created that was dropped on Japan to end the war. And some of the world's most brilliant minds came together in a project called the Manhattan Project to see if they could figure out what they could understand about the nature of reality so well that they could create some kind of device to halt human war. And they wanted to make it cease. And they hoped that what they created would be a kind of weapon against hate and violence and war, oppression and domination, and that they would free the world, that they would liberate the world. But they had to figure this out. And you're watching this movie, it's about 3 hours, and almost all of the action takes place within the minds of the characters, particularly Robert Oppenheimer. And the actor that played him so beautifully has these mesmerizing eyes. And half the time in the movie, it feels like you're just looking into his face and into his mind. Maybe the windows are the windows of his soul. And you're watching the turmoil of this lone figure who is in charge of this massive project that's going to have global repercussions. And he's having to take the risk of organizing this team and directing the project. And then they get to the point to where they test what they've done, and they start to realize the magnitude of what they have created. But this is the height of human intelligence at a certain time in our history. And then what was unthinkable becomes thinkable, and then what became thinkable became unthinkable. And Oppenheimer was transformed by the traumatization of what he had realized that he had done with his knowledge, his incredible genius. And he turned against his project. And he tried to warn the world, we don't know what we're doing. And then the world kind of kicked back, and he became almost an enemy of the people for a while. A fascinating film to consider, that the height of human intelligence may not be enough to manage life on Earth. And this movie questions human system making, just as the first one shows. Here's a result. The second one shows another result. Here's a third movie, and this just came out, and I saw it for the second time last Friday. I don't go to movies all the time, but when there is an incredible movie that I must see, I will go see it as soon as I can, and I know that I have to see it again. I enjoyed this movie tremendously. It's called Megalopolis. And I'm not selling tickets or reviews, but it's a brilliant movie. It's an eloquent movie. It's a beautiful movie. And it's kind of, compared to the other two, a little happier. It's got a lot more hope running in it. But it's a film that's kind of about the present. Though it's an epic in scope film, it deals a lot with history, particularly of Western civilization and our traditions, our cultural heritage, our philosophies, our sciences. The movie is set in a city that looks like New York, but it's called New Rome. And it's the height of human hedonism, power. It's a political megalopolis. And there's a conflict in this city between those who want to maintain the human civilizational system as it has been, but to continue to tweak it and work on it and improve it, and to continue to progress, which we're somewhat addicted to as modern human beings in a world that we've made modern for ourselves. And this is the problematic that we're going to come to which Contemplative Mayhem is a response, possibly. So in this conflict, there is another side of humanity that says, yes, we have done all these great things over our time, but we have created a system of devastation for our lives and for the life of the planet. And can we not imagine a livable world? Can we not imagine living differently? Could we not come up with another way to live on Earth and live with all things instead of trying to master and manage and control the world we're living? The movie depicts the world out of control, but that's the order of the world. And so the protagonist in the film is an architect who has the gift or the power of stopping time. And this is mysterious, mystical, magical, wonderful. And at the very beginning of the movie, you are informed of this. So I'm not giving away anything, and I will not let the cat out of the bag. I urge you to go see it as an exercise in thinking about the things that we are going to be considering tonight. But that movie is set in the present, and it has a hunger to imagine getting out of the system or the systematic that we are in. But all three films show a kind of dead end with human thought and human action. But the question is, what else do we have besides the ways in which we think and the ways in which we behave? Now, let me move away from films, but I'm going to use 3 slides, images from Megalopolis. Again, I'm not giving away anything, but these are slides of cuts from the film trailer. And you can see with this first one, in the dialogue box at the bottom, this is a line in the film, and it's a commanding point in the film. We are in need of a great debate about the future. Here's a second image, and there's this question of, we need to have this conversation, this very large conversation, but is there time? Because of how we are living, and I'll come to explain this in a way that is problematic for us to kind of induce our contemplative response or our responsibility. But we're questioning time given the future and how we need to live. This is a deep, deep question and a deep issue for us. Very realistic, very pragmatic. One more slide from this movie, Megalopolis. Here we get an image of characters in the film, but in the film, they are in a snow globe. And it doesn't have anything to do with the Snowpiercer movie, but it's like we are in a world that we could hold in our hands, but do we not fathom that the world is greater than what we are managing and controlling, what we think we know? The world transcends, it outstrips human knowledge and human systems of behavior. And it poses this question. This third movie poses the question, and I'll come back to it later. Is the way we are living the only one available to us? Are we kind of stuck? Is this a fate? So I'm going to raise some red circular questions. Here, let's shift. We're going to go to an ultra pragmatic agency, the United Nations. The United Nations, very much like those three films, believe that the world in which we are running and managing is not sustainable. And about a decade ago, they came up with a revived purpose of the United Nations. They have 17 goals for the world, and these are sustainable goals. These are goals to get the world into a sustainable rhythm, into a kind of balance or harmony, because the United Nations, as an international cognitive entity, thinks that the way in which we are going, all of our crises, are not going to turn out well, and we have to change course. But how in this world do you change the world? How in this world do you change human nature, human beings? It does not seem possible. But these are the goals that the UN has created. And though I applaud them, welcome them, support them, I have to question, is this going to work? Now, the next two slides come from scholars who are associated with the United Nations, who are trying to help the UN figure out how to do this, how to reach these sustainable goals, how to secure them in the future. And what you're looking at is a graph that's called an X graph. So, oops, this is an X. The gold is where we are now. So the gold is the system of managing the world at the moment. And they're calling it that it's not stable, and that we are in a stage of destabilization, this sense that everything is messed up, everything's falling apart. Who's in charge of the world? It looks like things are going to go downhill. So the trajectory of where we are in the world right now is revealed by this gold line, and the thought is that this is going to go down. It's going to go into the second mode, breakdown. So the system of the modern world, of human civilization, is perceived to be breaking down, and it's going to have to, because of the weight of it on the world, on the living world, or on the whole world. At the bottom of the graph, starting the second part of the X in blue, is the emergence of a new way of living. And so the emergence is down low. Up high is this system that we're in, but it's going down. So the question becomes, how do you move up? How do you bring, maybe, you could call it a new system, but how do we create a new way of life, a new future? And in the second stage, which is a breakdown, they think that we should start to accelerate this new way. But we don't know what the new way is, and we don't necessarily know where it's going. So in the middle here, there's a kind of combustion chamber where the old ways in which we have lived on Earth are coming into conflict with what are going to have to be new ways of living. And what is going to turn out of this conflict? Those movies kind of suggest some different angles. But as you go to the third phase here, or third section, the old way that's declining is our modern way of life. It's going to break down as envisioned by the UN and by these scholars, and then it's going to stabilize. In modernity, or the modern world, we will still retain some things, but at a lower level of certainly not a dominant level of supremacy or superiority. But a new way of living is going to have to supersede the old way. This is intelligent, but I'm going to have to question it a little bit. And let me show you one more version of this particular graph and slide. This is another one from another scholarly article that is part of the UN's resources. It is the same kind of graph. It's an X. In the middle, you've got this sort of star in the background. That's the combustion chamber in a way. So our present system is destabilizing. Seems to be, the trajectory is toward greater and greater chaos. We need something to come up fast and help us. But we're going to have some terrific conflict. We're having it now. We're going to continue to have it until something else takes hold and opens up a new way of living that is different from a long trajectory of human thought and human behavior and human order on the planet. But I'm kind of questioning this as well, that this X is a kind of double loop, or it could be a kind of Mobius strip to where, like that Snowpiercer train that's going around and around and around the world, maybe we're just sort of repeating the new breaks out of the old, and then the new becomes the old again, and then we have to break out again, and nothing really changes. We just keep managing all of this supposedly for ourselves, but something seems quite amiss with that this is not going to continue as if this is natural, as if this is reality. This is what I'm suggesting we think about. And so I'm raising a question of whether we're going to be able to emerge and that we know what we're doing. And I'm thinking of Oppenheimer here. Do we really know how to live with everybody and everything on this earth? I don't really think we do. But if we don't, then the unknown is still part of our life. It is still part of our existence. That's where contemplation comes in. And so in the order that we have imposed on the earth, I'm asking you to wonder about contemplative mayhem within an order that might be tragic. Here's some news from the day. This is just standard. So this is a live presentation. This just came out. The Nobel Prize for Physics was just given to two scientists today, two physicists. There's a picture of them. This is from a screen by the Nobel Prize Committee when they made the announcement. And I'm going to show you some quotes from a New York Times article that came out this morning. And if I can read this with you and you think about this, there's going to be three sections, three statements, and they're in order from the article that came out this morning. Journalists in the room took turns asking Dr. Hinton, one of the Nobel Prize winners, who's been called the godfather of AI. Both of these scientists have created machine learning. And I'll come back to that point in a second. Questions about his work. And he expressed worries over machine learning and said it would have an extraordinary influence on society. Here's a man in his 70s who was just given the largest scientific prize for a lifetime of work on helping people learn how computers can learn for themselves and how computers can become intelligent and make decisions for themselves as well as for us. Much of his research has been used for machine learning to improve medical care, for health care. But he's a little concerned about what he has done, much like the Oppenheimer effect. A second statement, according to Dr. Hinton, it will be comparable, this AI revolution, this machine learning as the new age. We're maybe no longer in power here. Machines, computers, the digital world. It will be comparable with the Industrial Revolution. he said, instead of exceeding people in physical strength, it's going to exceed people in intellectual ability. We have no experience of what it's like to have things smarter than us. Now, that statement we may, well, wait a minute, maybe there have been some other things maybe that are smarter than us. But then we have this next statement. While Dr. Hinton expressed his concerns, he shared that the advanced technology would bring much better health care. It'll mean huge improvements in productivity. This is what we want. This is progress. He said, but we also have to worry about a number of possible bad consequences, particularly the threat of these things getting out of control. So here are the latest Nobel Prize winners in science who have helped us understand and maybe appreciate how machines can do thinking better than us, and we may not be able to control what we have created, what we may have unleashed. This is kind of Promethean in terms of concern. And there's a link to the New York Times. I encourage you to read the article. There'll be more coming from this. But this raises a big question. Now let me move to Merton. This is Tuesdays with Merton. I have to say something about Merton. And I'm going to quote him at the end, but I'm not going to give too much. So I'm hoping that you know Merton. That's why you would come here and you can read a lot of Merton into things. But on the left, to me, as I have worked through this presentation and this argument. And the red question at the top of your screen, I'm going to click and turn it blue. So these red questions that are cautious and questions that are about dangers, I would like this not to continue to rehash them in the ways in which we have. I would like us to contemplate these questions. So I would like to turn the questions into contemplative questions, and not just about what we are doing and what we are managing or trying to manage. What is our knowledge and what are our control powers? But what is contemplation? What else can we do? How else can we live? Can we contemplate that? Well, I think we need to also consider what is contemplation? What is false contemplation? What is true contemplation? Without thinking, we know exactly what we're talking about. That's unsettling. And it's got a little mayhem to it. So hang on. Two more books I'd like to add to this contemplative response of Merton's, and I'm going to add some more in just a moment. One is an American philosopher, died a couple of decades ago, Henry Bugbee. I love this book and I love this man so much. And one time I wrote an article for the Merton Annual in which I compared Merton and Bugbee. And I'm kind of reading Bugbee as much as I've ever read Merton. And that's just that one book. There's some other articles, but this book, it might be dry, but it's a journal, and it is an extraordinary example of contemplative thought about contemplative life. And I really encourage folks to order that, to purchase it and read that sometime. And a second book is by a Czechoslovakian philosopher, Jan Patočka, died in 1977 in police custody. Patočka was part of the Velvet Revolution. Czechoslovakia was under communist rule at the time. He is the philosopher of a revolution that you would be familiar with in terms of the name of Václav Havel, who is a Czech playwright who became president of Czechoslovakia after the wall came down and the country became independent of communist domination. As the Soviet Union collapsed and Russia returned to its cultural roots. Patočka is an intense contemplative philosopher. This book is really hard to read in a way, but if you have a taste for these kinds of things, this is a beautiful book to read. And I'll come back to a point that both Bugbee and Patochka make in relation to a point that Merton will make at the close of the presentation. These books I cannot summarize or explain, but if you know how to take a snapshot of a screen, go ahead and do that. You can look at these later. You can email me. I'll be glad to send you a reference list of these. But these are 8 beautiful books that I think are completely on target with the problems of our day and the problems in this presentation, the problematicity of our times in the world and the way in which we are mismanaging life on earth. They are all grappling with the great debate. How else could we live? And I would extend the invitation to read these books, and they are extraordinary things, but they are a wealth of resources for me. So now we're getting to the heart of the presentation. I'm probably out of time. This is kind of the way I do. Here's a window. It's a metaphor. We're going to look through the window, but we want to open the window and we want to go through the window into the world. Each window pane is going to represent the next 4 slides. There's one in between, but 4 slides that are diagrams or illustrations. And these are 4 ways in which I want to get to contemplative mayhem. So I'm just going to move in. So you can see kind of what these are going to look like. There's a kind of a grayish background. Each pane is a number, has a name. This one's called the compulsion. We start with this pane in the window, but we're going to put all 4 panes together as one window. So these are 4 segments. The modern world in which we live in is a modern age. It's a modern era. It's only 500 years old. It is also a period of time that is called modernity. And modernity is the lifestyle of human beings at this point in the history of life on earth, particularly of human civilization. We made the world modern, and that's problematic. So this is a kind of critique of modernity. Coming out from the structure of modernity, the house of modernity, we could call it, are 2 arrows, and they've got points at the end, and they are continuing. And this is where we are. The modern world, the modern age, the modern lifestyle, the modern system is continuing. It's continuing, and it looks like it's unstoppable. I'm using 2 symbolic arrows to suggest that there's a trajectory in which we are coming apart. It's as if we are splitting. We are going in both directions at once. One is going up in continual progress and hope for a better future. The other one at the very same time is going down. I'm going to name the one that's moving up acceleration, because it has to move faster and faster. But while it moves faster and faster, more of our lives, more of our societies, more of the world itself is being degraded by this system. Now, this is a negative view. I'm going to get to positive, and I'm not throwing everything out, the baby with the bathwater. But I'm suggesting we look at things this way for a few moments. These 2 arrows are taking off, and at the same time as we are hurrying through our life, we are losing so much of our life. But this is the modern way. This is what's not sustainable. In the middle of this trajectory is an idea of force, of exponential growth. And our growth as a human society, as a managerial system for the world, is continuing to grow in magnitude and scope, in the range in which we are knowing the world practically to death. This is a force. How do you turn this back? How do you blunt it? How do you stop something that seems to us to be unstoppable? And it's us. We're the unstoppable ones. Can we stop ourselves? It just doesn't look like it's possible. Especially if all we've got is just the way we think and the way we do things. Is there not something more? This trajectory that is splitting, that's pulling us apart, and we are trying to live like this, is widening as a gap. And so the trajectory, and as the UN Sustainable Goals suggest, we can't continue like this. You could think of the widening gap as like the incredible inequity that is occurring in the world, the growing inequity between two entire populations and classes of people, just in terms of the highest wealth in the hands of a few, and just the billions of people who have practically nothing. How could this be happening? What is wrong with this picture? So this picture, this trajectory, this force, this exponential growth has created a box, and we are in this box. And in the box is the world from this modern point of view. So our modern point of view, I'm just saying, is a system by which we think we have commandeered the world, and we are having to take care of the world, and it's our responsibility. It is our baby, and we're trying to take care of it, and we're trying to make it work. But our system that is holding this world together, our system is coming apart. Right at the same time that it seems like our world is threatened by the way we live, what is called the Anthropocene, global warming, civilizational crises, humanitarian crisis. We don't have enough money. We can't get enough money to solve our refugee crisis, our immigration crisis. Who on earth is going to do anything? We could go to the religious answer that kind of explains all this away and say, well, God is in control. God is going to take control. I'm not going to deny that, but I am going to suggest that there's a kind of commotion in our theology and a kind of doctrinal arrogance, or maybe it's not an arrogance, but it's a haste in which we kind of fill in the unknown from a religious standpoint and say it's sacred or it's holy or it's God, and that everything will be okay and everything is in the hands of the Creator. I'm not saying that's comforting to us, but I'm saying that is part of the modern problem in the way we think and we live our lives. And I don't think it's really contemplative. And this kind of helps us open up, well, what is contemplative? We don't want to throw out our religious beliefs. And I don't mean simply Christian, but Muslim and Buddhist, Hindu, and so on. I'm not bracketing religion. What I'm saying is that we could move too quickly, given the trajectory in which we're living, to fill in the uncertainty. And this system that we're looking at with the world, and this is the longest slide explanation, the others will go over a little quicker. I'm calling this system of modernity the system of false contemplation. That we have gotten to the point that we think we are contemplating the whole world, but we are not contemplating the whole world. How could we do that? True contemplation can contemplate the whole world, but it has to acknowledge that the whole world has an enormous unknown dimension to it, and we're not going to be able to ransack it, and we're not going to be able to know what it is. So we should not fill that in now by hastily concluding things in a way that makes sense to us. Can we live without making all of the sense that becomes sense to us? This is what I'm raising as an enormous question. Let's look at the second slide. So this takes up where this first pane left off. So we kind of move to the left or right or down below. The system of false contemplation is now in purple as a kind of wound, a wounded symbol or color. The world is still perceived to be within our system. The trajectory arrows are still there. But this slide is called conditions. And because we're continuing to live in this way, we are living under conditions, and I would like to name them for the sake of giving us some expressions to use. The first one is the condition of commotion. What I'm suggesting is that we are living in commotion. We're not living in the whole world, we're living in a system system. And in that system, our activity is supplanting our action. We are so busy. We are moving so fast. We do not have enough time in the day to do all the things that we need to do. In fact, most of our work assignments require us to do umpteen number other things before we can even get to what we're supposed to do on our job. And so many of us leave work, and I'm still working, but I'm retiring soon, but I'm still going to be in commotion. We are leaving work wondering, how's the organization or the institution going to last? We are doing all this other stuff, and we're not even being able to do our job. I'd just like to accomplish something simple, a task, but there's just too much other stuff to do. How did we get into this situation? This modern way, this lifestyle of humans on Earth at this moment in time has created a condition for us that is commotion. And it's not just us. Deer, bears, fish, birds, honeybees, all life are living their lives in commotion. Second condition, there are three, is oblivion. Another condition in which we are living, or in which we are barely living, and we know something is wrong, is we're forgetting things, we're missing things, we're not able to look at things. We're wondering what happened to people, to values, to decency, to civility, to common ground, to understanding, bipartisanship. I mean, we can look at it in all kinds of ways. Where is everything? Well, I might like to focus and maybe grab hold of something or create a hobby. I don't have time. The way I have to live renders me oblivious to too much of the world. And I just have to focus on what I can focus on. And I don't have much time to focus, and I'm not going to be able to focus. This is just very problematic. It is maddening. Here's the third condition. All three of these are intersectional, interrelational, interconnected. They are intermeshed. As we are so busy, as we can't act, we can't do something, we are frantic. But while we're frantic, we're having to ignore so much, so we can't even get to our problems because of how we're living. And so things are disintegrating. And I mean this condition in two ways. Disintegrating in terms of deteriorating, but also disintegrating. It is like everything that used to seem whole or together, or what was communal, is just coming apart. And we can't repair it. We don't have the resources. We don't know where they are. We don't know what happened to them. But we're even oblivious of this disintegration. Even when we have snippets and senses and we realize it's happening, we got to go right back into commotion, and we become oblivious of what is disintegrating, and we realize we're moving too fast, but we can't slow down. These three conditions are compounding, and these are conditions for life in this modern era, in this system that is falsely contemplating the world in which we could really be living in. Big red question comes at this. This slide I'm going to skip, goes into a little context. How did we get to the modern world? We don't have time for that, but I'm questioning it. But there's a chart, and it's not even an explanation. But I'd like to leave you with this one idea of this book, Thought as a System. It's one of the 8 on another slide. David Bohm was a physicist. He knew Robert Oppenheimer. He was not allowed to be on the Manhattan Project. He later went into all kinds of other avenues of thinking and worrying and philosophizing about the world that was breaking apart. And he says, how could we be doing this? And he located the problem in human thought. And the problem in human thought for David Bohm, a physicist, was that we have systematized all of life, and we are missing the life because of our system. We're not able to think because all of our thoughts are coming from the system of thought. And for me to read a book like that, as someone who is not simply wanting to think my way out of a thought system, but find the roots of thinking itself in contemplation, whatever that might mean. That book is invaluable to consider a modern system of thought falsely contemplating the world, and we can't think our way out of it. What else do we have? Bohm wants us to suspend the way we think so that another way of thinking could happen. This is what the UN is trying to do at the moment. This is a painting from the mid-1800s. This is of England. This is a painting about the Industrial Revolution. Notice that in this painting, at that time, a couple hundred years ago, we still had time to move away from the world that we were producing, creating, stomping on, polluting. You could get out into the country and you could look back at the pollution, the smokestacks, and you could be sad, but you could also say, well, look at these trees and look at these sheep and goats and deer, and we can have a picnic and we can still take time and we can paint, and there's no electricity yet. And so, we're okay. Fast forward to the next century, particularly at the end of the century, right into our century. Where are you going to go now? We're talking about getting off the planet. Elon Musk the other day wore his shirt, Occupy Mars. This is a measure for some people. We have enclosed the entire planet with a system of surveillance, of monitoring, of information. And what you're looking at is the Earth with all of these satellites. And these satellites are moving around the world. This is almost like the Snowpiercer movie. And our lives are dependent on these satellites. And when these satellites go down, none of our equipment works. We have chaos. And we're depending on an order that we have created. And now we want these machines to learn how to do this better. This is just uncannily problematic for us at this moment. How do we respond? The word you're looking at is a Hopi, a Native American people. And here's the definition of it. Kawanaskatsi is how you pronounce it. And it comes from a documentary that was made in 1982 with that title. Kawanaskapi, as you can see, means crazy life. This was an indigenous perspective that was brought out into a incredible science, special effects movie about the condition of the world in 1982, and we were calling it crazy, that life was in turmoil, that we were out of balance, that the state of life calls for another way of living. So we've been talking and worrying and concerning ourselves with this problem that is continuing but growing. How do we respond? So here we come to the key slide. I'm getting close to the end. I hope we have time for questions. So I'm going to kind of rush through this. But this is where contemplative mayhem comes in. This pane of the window is called the reprieve. And the reprieve is to give the world a break from the suffering of our managerial system. Here you see the box. This is the modern world system. Instead of the world being the box now, I'm suggesting we look at in the box that there's a poison in that system. We still get the trajectories. We still get the arrows coming out, the lines that's pulling apart. The system is going to continue. I'm going to nickname the system vita brevis, which is a phrase going back to Hippocrates and Seneca, the philosopher Seneca. And the words mean short life or life cut in short. I'm suggesting that we're living in a modern era in which we have created a system of thought that's falsely contemplating the world, and it is cutting the life of the world, including our lives, short of its fullness or our fullness. And this system began, the dotted line is going to be named the severance. The modern world began when we severed our experience of the world we were living in, and we stopped contemplating the unknown, the wholeness of the world, what Thomas Merton calls the hidden wholeness. When we became modern, or thought we were modern, we severed the contemplative element, the contemplative aspect of our experience, and even of our history. So on the left of that dotted line where the severance began, this is a historic critique, a philosophical argument. Take it with a grain of salt, but this is what I think. That on the other side of the severance was the whole world, and we were contemplating it. And the world was contemplative. We weren't the only contemplatives. Life was contemplative. And there was a flow. This is a symbol of a river. And there was the earth, and there was the sky, and there was sun, and they were parts of the whole. And there were the stars, there was twilight, there was the cosmos, there was what was beyond all that we could see, think, imagine, and travel to. But ever since the modern age, we have eclipsed that. We're not thinking about those kinds of things. And this is where I'm suggesting we need to practice contemplative mayhem. That's what that blue figure, I don't know what that design is, the image of, but let's call it contemplative mayhem. And look at where it is. It is like a transitional moment. As these lines continue their course, I'm saying we need to practice contemplative mayhem now. And I'm suggesting that if we do, whatever contemplative mayhem may mean, and I'll give it a meaning, but not an exhaustive one, that new lifelines can emerge. If we can restart and recover, repair our contemplative capacity to contemplate the wholeness of life beyond the system of modern thought and behavior, that those trajectories can start to subside, they can start to decrease, we can start to bend toward something different. That's the combustion chamber, this time that we are in, of conflict, of destabilization and chaos, emerging order. If we can hold on with contemplative mayhem and not reorder the world, then we're going to move into, I'm trying to imagine, a time, an era that is just completely open. It does not have a system to curtail or impose. And that goes to slide 4 then. So on the left is you have the continuation of the argument. The red and dark blue lines or arrows are the trajectory of something that's going to continue unless we do something different. But this is problematic. We can't do something different other than what we've always been doing. Even if what we've always been doing is contemplating, if it's not altering our course, maybe we need to reconsider what it is that we are doing when we are contemplating. Part of what that would be is the mayhem. So the contemplative mayhem practice now, maybe will open up something. And I'm going to say that it can open up our activity, free our activity from commotion and from having to be oblivious and having to disintegrate things. It can also liberate our inaction, our sense of helplessness, but our passivity, our sense of leisure. For too long, action and contemplation in our Western cultural tradition of thought has pitted action and contemplation against each other. Several people, such as Merton, have said they're complementary, they're integrated. But I think what we've been sort of misthinking all of this time is that the parallel of activity or action is passivity, not contemplation. That and there's a tandem, there's a balance, there's a relation there. But contemplation is something different. And so I'm suggesting with this odd, awkward term, contemplativity, that these are 3 dimensions of life. These are 3 elements of life. If we practice contemplative mayhem, what is contemplative in us and what is contemplative about the world can maybe come into manifestation. Maybe it can begin to grow. Maybe it can emerge. And maybe it's not us who are doing it. Maybe life itself is contemplating us. Maybe the world is contemplating us. Maybe God is contemplating humanity. We're not the patents, or we don't hold the patents. We're not the possessors of what we are trying to do. So maybe it's not something we're trying to do. Maybe it's another way in which we live. So these are three aspects of living. And what I'm getting to the final point, and forgive me for going too long, but I really am at the last two slides. You see an insole on the right, an image of wholeness. This is a wisdom symbol. And I love the coloring of this one. So this is just sort of a personal preference of mine. I hope you like it, but I certainly didn't draw it. It looks like watercolors, but it's an unfinished circle. Merton drew one himself. This is a conception of wholeness. We can't finish wholeness. So contemplation of wholeness cannot be contemplation that concludes what wholeness is. Wholeness has to remain unknown in its totality, or a better word, in its infinity. How do you live at home with what is unknown and unknowable? It goes against the grain of the modern thrust or compulsion of living. And so what I'd like to put, not fill in the gap, but what I'd like to say is a kind of statement to kind of conclude, and then we'll return to Kandinsky's painting and three quotes. The contemplative mayhem is living a living life as opposed to a deadening life, or a commotive life, or an oblivious life, or a disintegrating life. Contemplative mayhem is a way of living a living life that is at home in the unknown, living without a system, and yet, and system is capitalized, that means we can have systems of thought can be fine, but we can't have a system that manages the whole. That is impossible. That's delusion. That's false contemplation. So, and yet we can live in relation with the unknown as we live in relation with the whole. That's a living life. And I promise you, the film Megalopolis is yearning as hungrily as it can for a livable world. How do we see it? We can contemplate it. We can't see it like we can, and we can't paint it. But here's a beautiful painting by Vermeer. And here, the four panes I just showed you, there are multiple panes on this window, but look at what this beautiful painting is depicting. She is opening the window. When you open the window, no matter how you see things, you open the window, you let the whole come in. All of the whole can't come in, but you open yourself and your life and your home to the whole world. What if we loved that whole world? Could that not be what contemplation is? Would that not be contemplative mayhem, if not madness? To love the world that we are not loving, and to go out that window, to go into the world. That would be contemplative mayhem. There's the name of it. Came out in the 17th century. As we were becoming modern, we still had time to paint and muse on our life and appreciate beauty and that vivid blue color that is so symbolic of contemplation for us. You're looking at a close-up of grass. This is the real world. But how do we see what we're looking at? How do we see the world that we are in? How do we see the world situation? How do we see contemplation? Here's a little haiku by a Japanese poet named Issa, one of my favorites. I almost can't get through the day without saying this poem to myself. He said, and he lived in the couple of centuries ago, not too long ago, the morning dew is the morning dew. And yet, oh, and yet, another way of thinking about this, the world is the way it is. The real world is the real world. It is what it is. But the contemplative mayhem spirit in us wants to say, well, maybe, like it is what it is. Reality is what it is. The world, history, everything, it is what it is. And yet, there may be more to it than we know. This is what poets bring to us. This is a gorgeous contemplative poem and a gorgeous example of contemplative mayhem. And there's the book I took this particular translation from, came out in '97. And there's another one that does not have the word "oh" in it. The last line is "and yet," and there's an ellipses, 3 dots, and then another "and yet." That's a beautiful rendition translation too. But I like this one with that "oh" in it. It's almost like the cry of the soul. And yet, oh, and yet, and you can't finish it. You can't say what comes next. That would be contemplative mayhem. And it's a response to the question in Megalopolis, is the way we are living the only one available to us? This poem says, if we say yes, or if we say no, and yet we don't really know. So here's the last slide, Contemplative Mayhem, Sky Blue by Kandinsky. Merton said, there is a hidden wholeness. As you look at this picture, there is a wholeness that Kandinsky saw. If Merton saw this, and I bet he did, he would see wholeness here. And you don't see all wholeness, but you see wholeness. Along with Merton, Henry Bugby said in his brilliant book, Contemplative Philosophy, it is enough to participate in this, to be at home in the unknown. And that's where I got part of my definition of contemplative mayhem. Contemplative mayhem is aware of the hidden wholeness that cannot be ordered by us, and we cannot impose our thought on it. We have to rest in it, but it is like being at home in the unknown. And the final quote that I'd like to bring, is the title kind of flips around, is from that Czech philosopher Jan Patočka, who teaches in the final lecture in his book Heretical Essays, that we are on the front line of a huge conflict in which we are at war with ourselves and at war with the world. We are on the front lines and the war is not going well. And we are all shaken. But what we've got to do is practice solidarity with all of the shaken. Not all the just shaken people, but all the shaken oceans and cities and fish and birds and all the creatures that you see in this picture from Kandinsky. Contemplative mayhem would be aware of the hidden wholeness, living at home in the unknown, and that's in solidarity with all of the shaken. And I'll end there. That's just an image. It is not the answer, but it's an image of contemplative mayhem. So I'll stop here. If we've got time, I would be grateful for that. I'm really apologize for going on so long.
Thanks so much, Gray. This has been very thoughtful and very provocative, and it's exciting to be taken on a journey with your thoughts and your contemplation. With that, I'll turn it over to Tom Malowitz, who's our moderator for the evening. Tom?
Thank you, Liz. I appreciate it. I see we already have one hand up for a question from Patricia. She had that up for quite a while. So Patricia, if you're still with us, if you'd like to ask your question, you're more than welcome to. Well, as we wait for Patricia, I do have a couple questions for you, Gray. As I was thinking about what you were saying, your talk reminded me a little bit of Merton's Cables to the Ace, number 8, where he writes a prayer to a computer. You know, this idea of what are we thinking? So I'm going to ask you, is contemplation an act or activity of human behavior? Is it just in the moment, or is it something that we are continually experiencing without necessarily realizing it?
Yeah, I think we are continuously realizing it. I don't know, so I cannot answer the question. But my best hunch is that it is. We can we can contemplate as an act, as an action. We can naturally contemplate. We can contemplate paintings. We can contemplate the ocean from the shore. Uh, but I see contemplation as part of a contemplative dimension of life itself. I think, and I don't mean life in a Hallmark card kind of hollow, superficial sense, but whatever is reality is alive, and it is continuous, and it's infinite, and it's probably eternal. And we don't really stop to contemplate, though we can do that. I think there is a element or a dimension, or maybe it's an aspect of the living reality or the living wholeness, that hidden wholeness, that is contemplative. And that contemplative nature is other than even our own human nature. We're also living beings. We are living human beings. We have human nature. We have action. We have non-action. We value. We devalue. We do things, but there's a way in which we do live, and we're not. I mean, we're living. We're not doing living. You know, we're not acting alive. We are living. Yet there's actions that unfold within the living. So I think there's a livingness that is deeper than our consciousness. It is deeper than what we are aware of, and we could not possibly act it out to the full. We can act it out as far as we go, and then we hit that unknown part, but we keep going. So we can continue contemplating, but we're no longer driving the train, so to speak. And that is, you know, maybe that's when Merton talks about it's a gift given to us. You can't make this happen. You can make it happen so far, but then you can't make it happen anymore. Something else continues it for us, and we go along with it. And that is, maybe that's deep communion. Maybe that's relationality. And that's probably a crazy answer. So feel free to say this is crazy, Tom. Go ahead.
Oh, that's quite all right, Greg. No, I appreciate it. Helping us understand to find presence in the tension. It's an amazing thing. Paul, you have a question. Please feel free to jump in.
Comment and the question. Gray, when you were talking about that, it made me think of Merton on more than one occasion said that a spiritual life, first of all, is life. And so it's a human life. I question though is I was wondering as you were talking as well about the system and the way that we're locked into the system and our thoughts come through the system and it constrains us. If I'm thinking again, Merton in writing to the letter to Pablo on concerning giants, and also in his introduction to the book on Gandhi, talks about the fact that we've lost a wisdom perspective, and suggests that there might be in indigenous societies a means of our grasping that wisdom again. I wonder what would you see as the possibilities of our being able to enter into that way of being or thinking?
Oh, I would be all over that with great affection. The one of the 8 books on a slide early in the presentation is by a First Nations educator, Vanessa Andreotti de Oliveira, and she wrote an amazing intellectual treatise called Hospicing Modernity. And the whole book comes from an indigenous perspective. And as we read so many indigenous scholars now, because the world is now open to indigenous traditions, because our modern advancements of knowledge are not paying out. And so we're now looking back at ancient wisdom traditions. Remember Merton, Ishi means man. Merton was looking at as much Native American thought as he could at the time. Vine Deloria Jr. was about one of the only thinkers who was writing in public discourse or speaking during his time and maybe a little after. But now the world has resources from indigenous traditions, and they have had, to my mind, they don't have the word contemplation, but they have had a sensibility as living beings that they are one with everything else. And so their very sense of the land being part of them and they were part of the land, and the land is sacred, as is the water, as is the things in the water, and as the relation between the water and the land, as between the water and the land and the human. That is a sense of wholeness that remains reverent, that is enduring as reverence. And they have, told the world for the last at least 200 years out loud, look at what you are doing to the world. They are speaking from a tradition that is deeply rooted in the contemplation of a wholeness that they would not dare for the life of them try to manage. And so Merton valued the wisdom that was coming from these peoples, and he wrote really a lot of good things. But we have even more to work with as resources now. And even in the United Nations and the scientists who are doing all the COP meetings every year, in their last report, the latest report, there's a whole section is, as scientists of the world, and we are the top leading scientists studying the climate, we wish to dialogue with indigenous traditions because we think you know something that we have never known, and we need to understand this. And that's an amazing thing for peoples who had discredited other peoples as savages and had no intelligence and weren't even human, to suddenly go, we need to listen to you. And I would say one other thing, because I didn't quote Merton too much, and I took the risk that of appreciating that we know Merton. In Thoughts in Solitude, one of the lines that I remember so fondly is he said, "My life is a listening." And that's what 1958. He conceived of his life as not one that's trying to talk, even though he was a writer, but he valued silence so richly and grandly. That is what we know and we cherish about our contemplative tradition writ small. But Native peoples around the world have also long understood and communed in silence, and to listen to the sounds in the woods and in the creeks, to listen to birds, to give them attentiveness, respect, because there's dignity there, because they are all parts of the whole. That is a life that is lived out in Mertonian terms as a listening. And we're just not listening well. Now that's one of the things that we're kind of losing. Practicing contemplative mayhem, one of the practices would be, let's recover some listening. Let's start to listen to people that we didn't used to listen to. That's a good way to get back to the whole world again. Sorry for the long answer, but that was a good question, Paul. Do we have any more time? I've been completely reckless. I'm sorry.
If we have time for one more question, I'll continue what Paul was mentioning. And I guess the question for you, Gray, is, when we talk about order and the order that we live in, it's very much based on this idea of conquest. And in academia, we talk about decolonization, and you talked a little bit about that. Do you think going back and removing those orders, that conquest mentality, is going to help us understand contemplative mayhem a little better? Kind of piggyback off of what Paul said.
Yeah, I think it certainly would. It's kind of like deconstructing what we've constructed as a system. And I'm completely in favor of it. But there's another philosopher I could bring in named Rainer Sherman, who taught at the New School in New York, along with Hannah Arendt years ago. He wrote a book that was just translated in 2002. He died several decades ago. called broken hegemonies. And hegemony is a kind of human system of order and control, domination, but not by force or physical force or military might, but by symbols and ideas and by language and in discourse and so on. And so if we deconstruct or destruct or decolonize the systems that have oppressed peoples, that have colonized the world, Sherman gives me a little pause with that, because he argues that one of the things we've been doing for centuries is instituting new orders, and then they become destitute orders. And then as soon as we experience destitution of what we instituted, we start to institute another order. And so there's a South African philosopher, Ashil Mbembe, who wrote a book of decolonial essays, but who is thinking, I'm not so sure that I'm trusting us to figure this out. It's almost like we're going to try to create another system that's not the other one. But we've got this pattern of creating these systems that continue to mimic the past systems. But just, you know, it's like almost like Ecclesiastes, nothing new under the sun. How do you break the pattern? We can't really break the pattern. So something crazy, contemplative mayhem is my, it's just a suggestion. It's a thought of how to kind of go ahead and live and think and act and decolonize as much as we can. But let us stay open to the possibility, what Eckhart said, try living without a why. You know, don't answer it. Don't fill it in. That is, I love Eckhart. Merton called himself an Eckhart man. And so living without a why would be living in the open without the temptation of falsely contemplating the world again, the whole again, and trying to rearrange things. One of the problems we're having with trying to figure out how do we do reparations for these years of enslavement and, you know, dehumanization. I don't know that we're going to be able to come up with a system of repair that's going to be good enough. It's just, it's too mammoth for us. But there might be another way. But it's a way in which we don't necessarily know, you know. But that sounds crazy to everybody who wants to know what we're to do. And that's the frantic situation we're in. So how do we break that and open ourselves up? This is what I'm thinking. Contemplation can help us do that, if our contemplation opens as well.
Well, thank you, Gray. Thank you, Paul. I don't see any other questions at the moment, but I do thank you very much for your time and the questions that we received. Liz, I'd like to pass it back to you.
Thanks, Tom. Everyone, please join me in thanking Gray for his talk and all the wisdom that he shared with us this evening. It's been really, really great and really thought-provoking. Thank you, Tom, for offering your opening prayer and for moderating discussion this evening. Thank you, Paul, for offering a prayer for Greg Hillis at the beginning of the webinar. And finally, thank you so much to Cheryl Williams, who jumped in this month to provide technical support for tonight's webinar. If you would like to access this recording or others, you can find links to the Tuesdays with Merton videos at merton.org/ITMS. And please join us in November when scholar Steve Millies will be joining us to speak on Merton and political discourse. If you would like to learn more about the work of our co-sponsor, the Bernardine Center at Catholic Theological Union in Chicago, please visit ctu.edu/academics/Bernardine-Center. If you would like to become a member of the International Thomas Merton Society and receive the Merton Seasonal magazine, as well as updates on our upcoming programs and conferences, and information on new books published about Merton, You can join us as a member online at merton.org. Thank you so much for joining us this evening and continuing to spread the word about Tuesdays with Merton. It's so great to see you all. Take care, and we'll see you again in November.